Cold room silence. There is a silence that does not comfort, one that does not soothe or offer rest. It is not the peaceful hush of snowfall outside a window, or the gentle quiet of a late hour when the world is asleep. This silence is weight, suffocating and sharp, so complete it feels intentional, like something has drawn the sound out of the world and swallowed it whole. I learned the taste of that silence in the cold room. The room itself was unremarkable at first. Bare walls, wooden floorboards scuffed by decades of footsteps, a single window at the far side with glass so old it rippled slightly, distorting the view beyond. The door clung to its frame when I tried to open it, hinges resisting, and when I finally managed to step inside, the air hit me like a blow. It was colder than the rest of the house, unnaturally so. Not the pleasant chill of a draft, not the damp coolness of stone. This was air devoid of life, heavy with absence, sharp against my skin as though it carried tiny blades within it. My breath plumed in front of me instantly. Frost filmed the window glass from the inside. And underneath the cold was that silence, humming low, not as a sound but as a sensation, a vibration in the marrow, an emptiness pressing against the skull. The first time I lingered, I noticed how wrong my body felt in that space. My ears rang faintly, though there was nothing to hear. My fingers tingled, as though the blood had slowed to a crawl beneath my skin. The floorboards did not groan under my weight as they did elsewhere in the house. Even my own movements seemed hushed, as though the air swallowed them before they could fully form. The smell was faint but impossible to ignore. Not the rot of decay, not the musk of mildew. It was something sharper, metallic, sterile, like iron and frost blended together, a scent that made me think of frozen blood. The walls carried it, the boards exhaled it, the window glass wept with condensation that froze into delicate veins. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Old houses have cold spots. Bad insulation, trapped drafts. But the more I returned, the harder it was to believe. Because the cold did not remain still, it moved. There were times when I stood in the center of the room and felt one side of my body seared by a sharp chill while the other remained untouched. I would shift an inch to the left and feel the air harden, slicing into my skin. The patches of cold were alive, roaming, circling me with deliberate pace. And with them came the silence, thickening, deepening, until even my heartbeat seemed muffled inside my chest. On the third night, I carried a candle with me. I wanted to test the air, to see if it shifted with the drafts I imagined. The flame trembled when I crossed the threshold, flickering madly though no wind touched it. The wax began to harden faster than it should have, cooling almost instantly. And then, as I stepped into the center of the room, the flame choked. Not snuffed, not blown out, it bent sideways, pressed flat against the wick by some invisible hand, and then extinguished with a faint hiss. The darkness rushed in like water, flooding a space that had been waiting for it. The silence swallowed me whole. I fumbled for the door, but in that moment the air itself seemed to shift, thickening, slowing me, pressing me from all sides as though I was wading through something unseen. My lungs fought for breath, each inhale sharp and thin, each exhale clouding before my eyes. When I burst out into the hall, sound returned abruptly. The creak of the hinges, the slam of the door, the ragged rasp of my breath, each struck my ears with painful clarity, as though the world had been muted and then turned on too loud. My body shook with cold long after I left, my teeth chattering uncontrollably, though no other room in the house held even the faintest chill. I should have avoided it after that. Any sane person would have. But the cold room gnawed at me. I could not stop thinking of it, of the silence that seemed to wait for me there. I told myself I would resist, but each night my steps drew me closer, as if the house itself was guiding me back, pulling me by the marrow of my bones. On the 5th night, I surrendered. The room greeted me with its familiar bite. Frost clung to the window like veins etched by unseen fingers. The boards did not cry beneath my steps. The silence thickened immediately, coiling around my throat, pressing against my ears. My breath plumed and drifted upward, vanishing before it reached the ceiling. And then I felt it. The cold no longer circled at a distance. It pressed against me directly, wrapping around my shoulders, brushing against the side of my neck with a touch that was not air. It felt like fingers made of ice, tracing lightly, testing me. My skin prickled, my blood recoiled, yet I did not move. My body rooted to the floor, transfixed. The silence deepened further, collapsing in on itself until it became a physical pressure, a weight in the skull. My ears popped faintly like descending in an airplane, though I had not moved. And then the sound began, not a sound in the ordinary sense, but the lack of it. The ringing absence in my ears stretched and warped, forming patterns, textures. Within the silence, I began to hear shapes. It is impossible to describe, but it was not random. There was rhythm in it, a cadence that suggested intention. The silence was not empty, it was speaking. Each throb of absence, each hollowed-out pulse carried weight, meaning, a message not meant for human comprehension. The marrow of my bones understood, even if my mind recoiled. I staggered backward, but the cold followed, pressing harder, clinging to me. My breath came out in ragged clouds. My skin burned with frostbite, though no ice touched it. The silence screamed in its own way, louder than any noise, a pressure that filled me to bursting. And then, in the frost on the inside of the window, shapes began to form. Not random whirls, not delicate lines of chance. They took shape with intention, streaks and curves that stretched into something resembling eyes. Dozens of them, staring inward, hollow, lidless, watching from the other side. The silence howled, though no sound touched the air. I clutched my head, stumbling toward the door. My hand closed on the knob, frozen to the touch, biting my skin with pain. The frost spread across the wood, racing toward my fingers, veins of ice threading into the grain. I wrenched the door open with a crack like shattering bone and fell into the hallway, choking on air that suddenly felt too warm, too loud, too alive. I slammed the door shut behind me. But silence is not confined by wood or walls. I still feel it pressing sometimes, even in other rooms, late at night when the house is still. The cold creeps back, brushing my skin, whispering with its absence. And when I close my eyes, I see frost forming across the inside of the window, patterns shaping themselves with deliberate intent. The eyes are always the first to appear. And when I open my own, I fear one night I will not be in the hallway anymore. I will be back inside that cold room, breath clouding the air, silence swallowing me whole, frost etching their gaze into the glass. The silence is patient. It is waiting, and it does not forget. Changing face in the glass. Mirrors are not just reflections. I learned that too late. They are thresholds, fragile panes stretched between here and somewhere else. When I looked into the old mirror in that house, I did not see myself as I should have. I saw something trying to take my place. The mirror stood in the upstairs hallway, its frame ornate with curling patterns carved into dark wood, varnish dulled by time. The glass was warped slightly, the way old mirrors often are, giving reflections a faint ripple as though seen through water. The first time I passed it, I barely noticed it at all. Just a relic, another antique left to rot. But I remember the smell, dust, old polish, and something faintly sour that seemed to cling around the frame. I became aware of it at night. The hall upstairs was dim, lit only by the thin wash of moonlight seeping through a window at the far end. Shadows stretched long across the wallpaper, patterns of branches swaying gently against the glass. Each time I passed the mirror in that light, I caught something wrong. At first, it was nothing more than a delay, a heartbeat between my motion and the reflection's response, like the glass hesitated before deciding to follow. The hesitation grew longer. I would raise my hand to brush hair from my forehead and see, out of the corner of my eye, the reflection still motionless. Only when my fingers lowered would it mimic the gesture in silence, too late to belong to me. The ripple in the glass deepened each time, distorting my features, pulling them into shapes that did not belong. My jaw seemed too long, my eyes too wide. The glass stretched my mouth into a grimace when I was certain I was frowning. One night, unable to ignore it, I stood before the mirror with the flashlight in my hand. The beam cut through the dark, landing on the glass, glaring back with a pale white bloom. My reflection stared at me, lips tight, eyes wide from lack of sleep. But then the glass trembled, not physically but visually, as though heat waves rippled across it. My face blurred, shifted, and for the briefest second, the features were not mine. The skin looked gray, slack, as though sagging from the bone beneath. The eyes bulged wider, black hollows rimmed with pale flesh. The mouth curved, not in a frown, not in a smile, but in some expression that seemed to mock the idea of either. When I blinked, the image was gone. My own tired face stared back, pale and shaken. I should have left it then. I should have draped the glass in cloth, covered it, destroyed it. But I didn't. Something about it pulled at me, insisting I return. The hesitation in the reflection, the subtle changes, the flickers, they gnawed at me until I could not help but confront them night after night. It grew worse. The reflection stopped aligning with me altogether. I would walk down the hall, arms at my sides, and the figure in the mirror would stand still, staring. Sometimes it would tilt its head slightly, a slow, unnatural angle, like a curious animal. Other times, I would glance and see it moving faster than me, jerking ahead, lips twitching silently, mouthing shapes I could not hear. The silence in those moments was unbearable. The air itself seemed to thin around me, sounds from elsewhere in the house muffled, as though I had stepped inside the mirror's world instead of the other way around. My breath fogged faintly on the glass, though the air around me was still. One night, I forced myself to stand directly before it. My skin prickled with 1,000 pins of dread as I raised my hand and touched the surface. The glass was cold, colder than it should have been, and slick with condensation. My reflection raised its hand, but its motion was slower, delayed, lagging behind my touch. And then, as my fingertips pressed harder, the reflection's hand continued after mine had stopped, pressing harder still, flattening its palm against the glass with unnatural intensity. The cold seeped into my skin. My pulse thundered in my ears as I yanked my hand back. The reflection smiled. Not me, not my mouth. My lips were still pressed into a tight line, trembling with fear. But the face in the glass pulled into a wide grin, teeth exposed, eyes gleaming with something too bright, too hungry. After that night, I stopped using the upstairs hall after dark. I avoided the mirror, creeping past with my eyes averted. But reflections do not need permission. They only need time. I began catching glimpses elsewhere, in the windows, in the sheen of water pooled in the sink, in the dark shine of the television when it was off. Faces flickering where my own should be, shifting, rearranging. Always the same wrongness. Eyes too dark, mouth twisted, expressions not my own. Sometimes they moved when I stood still. Sometimes they froze when I moved. And always they watched me. The final night I broke. I woke to the sound of glass. A faint, deliberate tap, as though a fingernail traced across its surface. My body froze under the blanket, the sound repeating, measured, beckoning. Tap, tap, tap. My heart pounded as I rose, my legs weak, my throat dry. The hall was darker than usual, moonlight smothered by clouds outside. But the mirror glowed faintly, as though it had drawn what little light there was into itself. I approached against every instinct screaming inside me. The air thickened, heavy, muffled. My breath came shallow. The mirror pulsed with a faint sheen, a skin stretched too thin. I stood before it. The reflection stared back, no hesitation this time, no delay. It moved with me perfectly, in sync, every motion identical. Relief trickled through me, shaky and uncertain, until I realized something was wrong. The face staring back was mine, yes, but too perfect, too smooth. My skin unlined, my features sharpened into some parody of themselves. The eyes gleamed wet and dark, too wet, too alive. And then it tilted its head. I did not. The grin returned, stretching wide, splitting the skin at the corners until it seemed the face would tear apart. I staggered back, but the reflection leaned forward, pressing itself against the inside of the glass, its breath fogging the surface from within. My own chest heaved, but the figure's breath came faster, heavier, fogging the glass with wild urgency. Cracks spread outward from the point where its forehead pressed, fine lines spiderwebbing across the pane. The tapping returned, louder now, echoing like nails raking the other side. The grin widened further, teeth too sharp, too many, crowding its mouth. I turned and fled down the hall, not daring to look back. Behind me came the sharp sound of glass straining, splintering, as though something pressed harder from the other side, ready to break through. The silence of the house devoured the sound, leaving me with nothing but my pulse and the faint imagined scrape of nails on glass. Even after I left that place, mirrors never looked the same. Sometimes I catch it still, in the bathroom, in the back window of a car, in the black screen of my phone before it wakes. My reflection holds still a fraction too long. My smile lingers a heartbeat after it should. My face twists in ways I know I did not move. The glass remembers me, and the face inside it is still waiting for its chance.